Recently became Roman Catholic, or Catholic, I don't know why I said Roman. But someone suggested your content, so I've been kind of digesting it and got curious about, as I went through my Protestant stage, which was 30 years, like I have a degree from a Protestant college and all that stuff, but it never sat right with me and whatnot. I started engaging in the early church. Slightly engaged the Eastern Orthodox position. I had some qualms with it, but I obviously still have qualms with Catholicism. I don't think one can just have no qualms with their faith, but I was curious what your main critique of Catholicism was. I believe you were Catholic at one point, and I don't know if I did find one video like on the Unum Sanctum, and I watched that. I'm just curious if that's like your go-to, or if you have, other ones. I'm basically saying like destroy my Catholicism if you can, and I'm sure it's around papal infallibility and whatnot.
I mean, there's a lot of different routes that one could take to argue against the Roman Catholic position. I have probably literally hundreds of podcasts addressing this from all the different angles. On the spot, if I was to pick a few things that I think are the strongest refutations, I would say the Alexandria and Chieti documents are totally incompatible with the claims of Vatican I. For example, Chieti 19 says, quote, appeals to the Bishop of Rome from the East express the communion of the Church, but the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the churches of the East. This is the Vatican website, the approved Chieti document, ecumenist document about the lack of universal jurisdiction for the Pope in the first millennium. That to me is a direct contradiction of the claims of Vatican I, which excommunicates anyone who doubts the universal primacy and supremacy and jurisdiction of the Roman bishop in the first millennium. So to me, that's a clear as day contradiction. I think the Unum Sanctum argument is a newer argument I've been using precisely because Vatican II Catholicism is so against its sort of medieval grandeur approach, and there are no post-Vatican II popes that ever talk about the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop. Vatican II documents clearly teach freedom of conscience, liberty of worship, all this kind of Protestant Reformation stuff. So to me, that's night and day with what you find not just in Unum Sancta, but also centuries earlier in Dictatus Papae. So we actually have at least 3 or 4 centuries from the Gregorian reforms all the way up until Pope Urban's Unum Sanctum that continue, Boniface VIII in 1302, that continue the necessity of believing in the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop to be saved. And to add sting to this, the Council of Chalcedon has canons that the popes of Rome never complained about, that clear as day say that clerics cannot be involved in civil matters. And so for the Pope to say that he is the world emperor and can have standing armies and that he can excommunicate anyone who won't fight for him, as Alexander VI did, the Borgia Pope, that to me is, again, night and day contradiction. So these are absolutely dogmatic. If you don't believe it in 1302, you cannot be saved. And I'm not just talking about communion with the Pope. I'm talking about the doctrine of the temporal supremacy of the Pope, that he is a world emperor. If you do not believe that as well, you are also damned. That is totally the opposite of what Vatican II teaches. And then I think the other strongest arguments that are or contradictions would be Lumen Gentium 16, which teaches that Muslims have the faith of Abraham, that Hindus can be saved by loving God and so forth. Nostra Aetate teaches the exact same thing. Reversal of the Roman Catholic teaching on the place and status of the Jews. Those are all absolute contradictions from what we read in documents like Cantate Domino at the Council of Florence. Now, there's many, many, many more, but those are some of the easy ones.
Okay, thank you for that. That's actually super helpful. Gives me a lot to engage with and explore. So are you saying that like the Pope's temporal authority was something back like inserted backwards from Vatican II?
No, I'm arguing that the Gregorian reforms from the document that's very famous called Dictatus Papae in 1090 all the way up until 1302 expand the temporal authority of the Roman bishop to the extent that by the time of Unum Sanctum in 1302, you must believe in the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop also to be saved.
and I'm not necessarily taking a bone in this. I'm asking this question strictly from like, I'm curious what you would say to it.
Sure.
Because I've heard the defense of that is that the Pope's temporal authority, as described in the Unum Sanctum and the papal documents, was never defined as infallible doctrine. Instead, it was a response to specific
no, that's not totally not
challenges.
true. This is a absolutely binding document for the entire church from the chair of Peter, and it's the famous papal bull of Boniface VIII requiring that you believe this for salvation. And it's not just this document; it's a tradition that's extending across centuries of Roman Catholic teaching from 1090 in terms of Dictatus Papae, and that's Gregory the Seventh. This is called the Gregorian Reforms. This is the famous century when you have about almost 100 years of nepotism where German rulers appoint the Pope. So Roman Catholics love to bitch about Caesaropapism. Literally, they have a century in the 11th century where German rulers appointed who the Pope would be. These popes were outlandish in their claims. You can look, for example, at Dictatus Papae in 1090, which is listed right here very easily for you. 27 propositions about what must be believed by anyone in the world. And I'm saying that even if you were to figure out some way that you don't have to believe Dictatus Papae or something like that, it doesn't matter, because 3 centuries later, or 2.5 centuries, in Unum Sanctum, you have an even stronger statement, which I'm pretty sure Unum Sanctum is also in Denzinger. Have you read Denzinger?
No.
Okay, so I've read Denzinger multiple times, and Denzinger includes, quote, the Catholic dogmas. So everything that's in Denzinger is part of the dogmatic tradition of the faith. Now, there might be some levels to it, but and maybe there's some Roman Catholic who has this position. I've never heard a Roman Catholic say that you do not have to believe what's in Denzinger. Maybe there is, but Denzinger includes, as, quote, Roman Catholic dogma, Unum Sanctum. It's paragraphs 467. Excuse me, that's Boniface VIII's other decree. Unum Sanctum is 468. And it is 469, which is about the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop, again in Denzinger. So it is complete bullcrap if a Roman Catholic says, well, you don't have to believe that, it's not binding. Anytime they come across a problem doctrine, it's suddenly not binding. Oh, so you don't have to believe Denzinger now? The sources of Catholic dogma? The Vatican cites Denzinger when it cites dogma.
Yeah, and I've come across that a few times, and so it is interesting. So I'll have to, cross-reference that and look.
Well, I mean, does it not seem like an obvious change post-Vatican II? That Ratzinger was literally de-Christianizing nations. He was arguing for the de-Christianizing of so-called Catholic countries. How does that square with you have to believe in his temporal supremacy to be saved?
Yeah, and I haven't read it, so I need to read it. But I know that the development of the papal office does, this is something I objected to when I was coming to Catholicism, which was the development overextends itself. But I couldn't reconcile myself to the East because there is no fulfillment of the seat of Moses. There is. And
what do you mean?
Answer to this.
Every bishop is the seat of Moses, just like when the Church Fathers, if you read Edward Denny's Papalism book, do you know the majority of the Church Fathers interpret the see of Peter as all the bishops? Every bishop is a Peter according to Cyprian. So you have this assumption that we have to have this Old Testament office of a high priest on the earth, or else the seat of Moses isn't fulfilled. Jesus is the seat of Moses. And the way that he rules is through Pentecost, sending the Holy Spirit. The whole purpose of the coming of the Holy Spirit, when you read the New Testament, everything that Roman Catholics think the Pope does, the New Testament assigns to the office of the Holy Spirit. Lead and guide the church, lead you into all truth. He will never forsake you. He will be with you unto the end of the age. He will lead you and guide you into all truth. The Pope? No, the Holy Spirit. So the very thing that comes in the 11th century, by the way, this crazy temporal claims for the Pope, just happens to be at the exact same time that Rome begins to adopt the Filioque and loses the Spirit.
Yeah, I mean, that specifically is like a whole other topic that it never, I could care, I don't want to say I could care less about, but it's like, it's not a pivotal one, but within that idea of the papal office kind of expanding itself, past its what I can currently reconcile, though I do submit to it. Obviously, I am Catholic. I am confirmed. The East, to my understanding, and again, I'm, could be very ignorant of this. Like when I was reading, have you read the book by Soloviev? I think that's his name.
I've read it. I read it when I was trying to. It's just stupid. It's like, I mean, I remember struggling with what you're struggling with, but you don't even have to go to that. I mean, all you have to do is look at the canons of the first 7 councils.
Why did like Cyprian, you have Tertullian, you have Irenaeus of Lyons, you have all these guys mentioning that this not supremacy of Rome, but that they elevate Rome in such a way
because they're Western Church fathers, and they're going to talk about their patriarchate as first amongst the patriarchates. I mean, in other words, if you were in Russia, the Patriarch of Moscow would be would have primacy, right? But primacy in the part of the Patriarch of Moscow or any other patriarchate, primacy does not equal infallibility in Vatican I. So
I agree.
Right.
My understanding, like when I was coming to Catholicism, was, well, I say, again, I submit to it, though I have disagreements about things, was, yes, Rome obviously and clearly throughout history has a definitive, there is a hierarchy within the bishops, so to speak. And Rome does get called upon, rarely, not in every case, in local and ecumenical councils. And each, as you say, I do read the Western Fathers. Those are mainly the ones that people will go to first. I think that's just the default, because you have Ignatius of Antioch specifically, like being one of the first ones to read, who is pretty clear about the again, I use the word supremacy, not in the same way that it's used today, but the elevation of Rome. And I understand, like, if you look at the churches of like the Byzantine Rite and stuff like that, they all affirm the papacy. So I read a book like Soloviev.
No, this is a fallacy. So first of all, because the Byzantine Rite churches, quote, affirm the papacy, those are all the people who came back into union with the Pope and were promised temporal gains and schools if they came back under the Pope. So their admissions really means nothing to us. Secondly, if you read the canons of the first 7 councils, and I have an article here called "The Ecumenical Canons Refute Papal Supremacy," what you start to realize is that every one of the ecumenical councils has all these canons that contradict Vatican I's claims. Why would every generation and every ecumenical council be passing canons and operating in a non-Vatican I way if Vatican I and Satis Cognitum claim that the Vatican I view was there from the very beginning? You have the entire first 1,000 years of the Church not operating on a Vatican I way. We have the Vatican in the Chieti document and the Alexandria document admitting the first 1,000 years of the Church didn't operate on the Vatican I way. So this is an admission. Now, they don't have good motives for this admission because it's about ecumenism, but it's an admission of all the things that we've argued. So Rome has sold you guys out. They have sold you guys out because they tried to convert you and bring you in and convince you of this position through their bad car salesman pitch. And now they're admitting that, yeah, okay, it wasn't the case that the Bishop of Rome had universal supremacy in the first millennium. Now, do you believe that he did, or do you think that Francis is wrong and the Vatican is wrong when they say that it didn't?
Yeah, I mean, that's literally one of the why I kind of have the questions I have, because there are those, I don't want to call them dichotomies yet, but there are paradoxes within that. And I don't know how often a later, whether it's through an encyclical or not, or like a binding document or not, is retroactively changing something that's occurred in the past. I know I can't think of the top of my head.
Retroactively changing the past. Is the Vatican God? Is he the Kwisatz Haderach? How do you retroactively change the past? What do you mean?
No, that's what I'm saying is I know there's instances within the history of the Church where something happens. Let's say this is arbitrary because I can't think of the actual example off the top of my head. Something happens in the 400 that's binding. We do have an example of a Pope coming along and saying that's not binding, like undoing the binding. And to me, like, I could reconcile that partially by saying, okay, they bind and loose. Like, I get that. And I know that, your claim, or not claim, your resolution to that is like, look at the scriptures and each bishop has the right to do this.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think that we would understand that to mean I think even the Roman Catholics would think that the Pope, most Roman Catholics would think that the Pope he's bound by certain things. Like he can't just retroactively say we don't believe the Trinity anymore.
Right.
Okay, so
right.
then the Pope can't just willy-nilly change, although he now says that the death penalty is contrary to the gospel. But if you look at the history of Catholic theology, the death penalty was argued for on the basis of natural law and natural justice. So actually the modern Vatican does believe that the Pope is above natural law. He can even change natural law now.
Yeah, see, there are things like that, which is why I think I hold to a lesser view of it, but it still doesn't.
Well, you have to believe Vatican I. There's no such thing as a lesser view. You don't get to pick and choose the type of papacy that you want. You're bound by the dogmatic teachings of Vatican I. Now, if you read the article, The Ecumenical Canons Refute Papal Supremacy, you're going to notice that all of these councils operate and pass all these canons that in no way make sense with Vatican I. So Vatican I is just simply not the ancient view of the Church, and the Chieti document and the Alexandria document admit this. So Roman Catholicism is false. That's the obvious answer here. I mean, how do we get from crusades to praying in the mosques towards Mecca?
At what point were you Roman Catholic before? I forget.
Yeah, I was a trad cat. Yeah.
Okay, so at what point? Like, how long were you Catholic?
8 years.
Okay, and was it at that point when you pieced together what you're explaining to me now, where you were like, okay, there's an issue? And
no, it took me ages and all kinds of wandering through endless books and whatnot, because in 2003, 4, 5, 6, there was a lot less resources back then than there is now. So we're talking like, almost 20 years ago, where I was starting to wander through this stuff. So no, I started the same way as you, where I started reading the Western Church Fathers, and I thought, it's Protestant or Catholic. So I went from Protestant to Catholic because I thought that was the only options. I read thousands and thousands of pages of Augustine. I read all the anti-Donatists, all the all the works on against anti-Pelagian writings. I read a bunch of read City of God. I read all that stuff, and I was like, yeah, absolutely, a full-on Augustinian Roman Catholic. And then I didn't realize, as often happens, like, you also got to believe all this other stuff. Like, Roman Catholicism is not just this, there's only a few papal teachings that I have to accept, and then everything else is what the Church Fathers teach. No. You got to believe all of the dogmas in all the councils and every papal ordinary teaching. And there is no picking and choosing. Now, all the Roman Catholics violate this because they do what they want. They craft their own Roman Catholicism, picking and choosing which papal teachings they want and don't want.
Yeah, well, that's the dichotomy of the trads versus, the Vatican II and Sectarius.
That's true, but it's also every Catholic's dilemma, because Roman Catholicism doesn't actually teach you or tell you what the list of the dogmas is. There is no list.
What do you mean? Well, yeah, there's the 255 dogmas.
The 255 dogmas. I don't even know what you're talking about. Are you talking about Denzinger?
I don't know if, again, I haven't read Denzinger, but there are 200,
there's a lot more paragraphs in Denzinger than 255.
Like, when I was becoming, so for me, it's not Protestant or Catholicism. It's Orthodoxy or Catholicism, right? Because Protestant, like, once my cognitive dissonance left, it wasn't hard. Like, everything kind of opened up. Now, that took a while. It took a year and a half of constant study and asking professors why I was wrong. And all
so. You're missing my point about that. I'm not saying that. I'm sure you can find a Roman Catholic somewhere who thinks he's listed the dogmas.
No, it's a listed thing. Unless I'm gaslighting myself.
I've never heard of this. Maybe it is.
Summary of the dogmas and teachings of the Catholic Church. There's 255 of them. You can just Google it. It pulls up.
You're missing the point. Who wrote this?
Who wrote the 255 dogmas?
Yeah.
It's taken from the fundamentals of the Catholic dogma.
Okay, that's Ludwig Ott. That's not dogma. That's the point. Ludwig Ott's book is a random theologian who's fallible, who lists the things that he thinks and analyzes are dogma. I'm making a different point, which is that's a fallible text. Why hasn't the Vatican given an infallible list that's ex cathedra of the dogmas? It doesn't exist. And that's the point, is that there may be a book called the 255 infallibly declared dogmas, which is just a PDF of what, summarizing Ludwig Ott. Well, is Ludwig Ott infallible?
Well, no, but if there's two, like if they're putting this out, because I think this is part of the Catholic Church. So
no, this is not. Is this signed off with ex cathedra papal authority?
Well, that's what I was about to say. Is like if they're not, and if
it's not, there is no list of the infallible dogmas. That's infallible. You can go read Denzinger all day long. And by the way, Denzinger has way more paragraphs than 255.
Yeah, and would you make? And I don't want to obviously put any words in your mouth, but I'm trying to get
the Vatican cites Denzinger. It doesn't cite holyjoe.org or whatever this list is from.
Would you say that there's dogma not found in the 255 here? Is I guess what my question would be. You would assert that?
Denzinger is 700 and something pages, and it doesn't even go up to Vatican. It just goes up to Vatican II. So absolutely.
Okay. So that's sort of where my exploratory process will probably begin.
But my point is different though, which is that I'm not saying can you find some Roman Catholic who lists dogmas. There's a million of those. I'm saying the Vatican never put out a list of what the dogmas are, which is precisely what they ought to do if Roman Catholicism were going to provide the epistemic certitude that they're always talking about to know the dogmas through the papacy. Right.
So then the East would rely on the 7 ecumenical councils for their dogma?
We have 9 ecumenical councils, not 7.
9, sorry.
And there's, there's not any magic formula to, quote, know dogmas or give you certitude. Everybody's in the same boat. So you're going to acquire the mind of Christ, and you're going to rely on the Holy Spirit as an individual to come to and to know that certitude. There is no special book. You could read a book like Orthodox Dogmatic Theology by Michael Pomazanski, but we don't make any pretensions to have some magic formula that's going to tell you these things. This is what I'm trying to say, is that Roman Catholicism is a sales pitch that promises all these things and never delivers these things.
Well, hang on, because I have a question about that, I guess, because if you're saying that, you're reliant on the Holy Spirit and whatever, which, obviously...
I'm saying everyone is in that boat. That's the individual existential certitude question. Right. And that's different from, are there public authorities that can make decisions in the church? That's called normative authority.
Right.
2 different topics.
Which the East has, and obviously. Is what I'm saying. Like, you guys have authorities that implement X, Y, and Z, which you are bound to.
Right. Yeah. But I'm saying that certitude is not going to come from a claim of or a belief in authority, like normative authority. Certitude is only ultimately for anybody going to be the work of the Holy Spirit. Don't you?
I guess I need to.
So do you not have to read all these papal documents? When you read this, let's just say for the sake of argument, there was only 255 infallibly declared dogmas for the Roman Catholic Church. How do you know you're interpreting this right when you read it? Do you have a THD? Have you been to Rome? Has the Pope quizzed you to make sure that you're... How do you know? How do you know you're interpreting all these dogmas right?
Well, obviously there's empirical verifications that they...
That's begging the question, because the document is an empirical document that you're reading. How are you going to empirically verify that you're interpreting code mediatrix or something correctly?
Well, no, what I was getting at is empiricity is it not the sole means of obviously knowing something? There's ways to verify any kind of exploration. If there was no way of knowing anything, I don't think you're getting at.
What non-circular means do you have to know that you are correctly understanding and interpreting the list of the 255 infallibly declared dogmas?
I will 100% say that it's through submission of authority. Like it isn't an articulation.
Again, you just literally missed the entire point of what I'm saying. This is why it doesn't work. How does saying I submit to authority give you the correct interpretation of the 255 dogmas? That makes no sense. It literally makes absolutely no sense. The two things are not connected.
It doesn't give me. If you're asking 100% certainty of that, it doesn't give me that.
It doesn't give you anything related to that. How does the proposition, I submit to the authority of Rome, tell you that when you go through 255 infallibly declared dogmas, that you are correctly interpreting each of those dogmas? It doesn't. It's begging the question. Saying I submit to Rome does not tell me if I'm understanding created grace correctly.
No, I get your point. And I think maybe I haven't even cared to address the
Well, that's the point that you asked me about. Well, how do you guys have knowledge, a certitude of the counsels and the teachings or whatever?
No.
You're in the same boat.
Sorry.
We're all in the same boat.
I think maybe you misinterpreted my question, or maybe I didn't phrase it right. Was more along the lines of the dogmas within the East. So I'm not talking about the certainty of knowledge or truth or anything like that.
So the Orthodox Church doesn't have this Roman Catholic approach of what are the list of the 200, 500 dogmas I have to believe. You go to the church like everybody else in the 4th, 5th, 6th century did, and you get catechized at the church, and you learn the creed, and you learn the doctrines on the basis of the creed, and then you read the scriptures and so forth. Do you think listen,
dogmas?
You're missing the point. You don't learn and know the faith through a book about a list of dogmas. You go to the church to be catechized, to learn and live the faith, then you know. So you live first and then you know. You don't know and find the formula, like a math formula, or some...
Yeah.
Okay, well, I agree so let's put ourselves, let's say we're in the year 310, and we want to know the dogmas. What can I look to from Rome if I live in Ephesus? How is Rome going to help me know the faith and know the dogmas when there hasn't been an ecumenical council and we don't really have any direct connection right now to Ephesus? Can I know the faith?
Yeah, you could. Well,
how?
That begs the mere Christianity question, which I don't like. But that's that.
No. How would every Christian in the year 300 in Ephesus know and learn the Orthodox Catholic faith?
Through the means what the church did.
What?
Through the means of the church. What do you mean? I agree with what you're saying with the catechism.
Okay, so and I'm giving you a specific example where there's no teaching of Rome and there's no ecumenical council yet. Can I know the faith?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then the Roman See and the ex cathedra documents are not necessary to know the Christian faith. Thank you.
Which was my number one objection to Rome in the first place, which is arbitrary. But I guess my question is, and I'm not even trying to debate you on this at all. I'm literally trying to garner some truth here. Is how, because obviously there are things within development of culture, things that have to be on matters of faith and morals, as Catholics put it, and they have to be, you're bound to them, or if they get loosened or whatever. Who the frick cares? Whatever. How does the East go about doing so? So on matters of like contraception, let's say, I don't even know what the ruling is.
Go watch Ubi's video. We've done an entire video on this because everybody brings this up. Everything is done in the same way that the church almost always did it, which is locally. How do you think the church operated in the year 300 when the question came out?
It's local councils,
Okay. So 300 years, no ecumenical council. Do you think the churches are all just asking the Pope in Rome what to do?
No, but I mean, what if you guys don't agree?
Huh?
Was it I think the common question that derives from that is
okay, and so was the solution in those centuries to just ask Rome?
Not every time, but there are times and instances that does occur, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah. Which doesn't obviously allude to what Rome is today. And I'm not making that argument.
Let's read the Alexandria document. Excuse me, the Chieti document, to show that this doesn't work. Chieti document, paragraph 19. Over the centuries, many appeals were made to the Bishop of Rome from the East in disciplinary matters, such as the deposition of a bishop. An attempt was made at the Council of Sardica in 343 to establish rules for this procedure. Sardica was received at a council in Trullo in 692. The canons of Sardica determined that a bishop who had been condemned could appeal to the Bishop of Rome, and that the latter, if the Bishop of Rome deemed it appropriate, could order an ex cathedra? No, a retrial to be conducted by the bishops in Rome? No, in the province neighboring the bishop's own. Appeals regarding disciplinary matters were also made to Constantinople and other sees. It is not just a Roman prerogative to do this. That's a false assumption that Roman Catholics talked about. That's not true. This is from your Vatican. Okay. Such appeals were made and were always treated in a ex cathedra way? No, a synodal way. Appeals to the Bishop of Rome from the East expressed the communion of the Church, but the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authorities over the churches of the East. That's a rejection of Vatican I. So, no, it is not the case that the appeals, the appellate system, was some sort of everyone just asked Rome to solve the problems. I was specifically given an example of the church in Ephesus if for the sake of argument, they did not have an ecumenical council yet, they did not have access to anything that Rome was talking about or saying, yet those people would go to the bishop and be catechized.
Right.
And they knew the faith without Denzinger, without a letter from Rome, without a list of dogmas, without a sola scriptura position. That's the Orthodox view, dog. So, if that's the case then, fast forward to now, how is saying I accept the authority of Rome helping you to interpret 255 dogmatic statements correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the argument, and it's. I think the argument you make is probably the strongest portion of it. But you would agree that there are East fathers that do, at least throughout the church history, that do not appeal to Rome, but have that same contextual supremacy. Not supremacy. Gosh, I hate that word. Elevation of Rome that we'd see in the West. Because earlier you said, like, obviously the West is going to appeal to their bishop.
Bro, but dude, if Vatican I is not true, the whole system is false.
Well, yeah, that's what. No, I understand, and I'm not dismissing that in any way. I'm trying to gather.
So what I said about the appeals to Rome is what Rome just explained in the Chieti document. You understand what Chieti is admitting is what the Orthodox have complained about for 1,000 years.
Right.
It's an appellate structure that was not just Rome, which I argued in the Ibarra debate, which people dismissed and poo-pooed, and now the Vatican document admits what I argued to Ibarra, that people also appealed to Athanasius, they also appealed to other sees, Constantinople, they didn't just appeal to Rome. If you had a problem like, say, Maximus, you would appeal to any of the patriarchates and sees that you could get on your side.
Well, Maximus says the Church of the Romans, is over all others. He says that.
Bro, it's not a matter of that. It's a matter of the Vatican I claims. And
right.
All you guys ever do...
I'm just saying the appeal, like, no one can... Neither...
Do you know why he says that? Because Constantinople is heretical. That's why he has to argue with Pyrrhus. So he's arguing against...
He still makes... Yeah, but my point is we still see East and West fathers making the same claim over and over throughout history, and I don't think either side...
No one disagrees that Rome is the first in the appellate structure. But appellate structure, as the Vatican admits, is a synodal retrial. It is not a universal jurisdiction. That's why I keep reading that paragraph to you.
Right. No, and I gather that.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to be mean to you or rude, but, I mean, what do you think that paragraph says? Because you keep just saying that, well, yeah, but they talk about Rome. The paragraph admits they appeal to Rome.
I'm not making, I think you're, and I understand why, because you have people come on here who are constantly or attacking and stuff. I'm literally not. I'm saying I agree with you. I'm going to have to look at that. And then secondary to that, I'm saying the idea that, earlier you said, well, the West are appealing to the Western bishop and stuff. I'm like, well, Maximus specifically and other ones
let's talk about that. Why does Maximus want Pope Martin on his side?
Well, it's irrelevant.
Let me finish. Why would it be irrelevant when that's the very thing that you're talking about?
It's irrelevant because I'm saying that at least we can point to East fathers who also made the claim, like you said, though. Obviously, the universal claim is that Rome is above the other ones, but not as it is today. And I'm not disputing that because I haven't engaged with the prior argument of Vatican I. Like, I'm not making an argument against you there. I'm just solidifying, okay, we have East and West fathers making the same claim, and understanding either we both affirm that and we can't appeal to them because they don't talk about what we have to engage with today, which is the supremacy of the papal office and all these other things. But I will engage with that at some point. Like, obviously, so the documents you listed were, what was the
Chieti document, the Alexandria document. I was making a different point with Maximus, where I was going was that when he appeals to Pope Martin, they have Lateran 649, the Lateran Council. And that was a papally called council. Pope Martin believed that it would be the first ecumenical council called and confirmed by the Pope. Okay?
Right.
Is it an ecumenical council?
No.
Correct. Why not?
I do not remember why not.
Exactly. It ought to be. And yet, even the Roman Catholic Church does not list it as an ecumenical council. How did they solve the dispute with the monothelites and the monoenergists after 649?
I have no idea how that controversy ended, other than
it ends in the next ecumenical council, which is 681, Constantinople III. So, a papally approved condemnation of the monothelites and the monoenergists did not suffice, even though it was intended to be an ecumenical council that the Pope called and confirmed. Nobody accepted that as the final thing. Constantinople III happens. They investigate the teaching of Pope Agatha, who, by the way, teaches the essence energy distinction in his letter. And so Constantinople III is the ecumenical council, not Lateran 649. And that should, by the way, be enough right there just to prove the Vatican I view was not operative then.
Well, it definitely does something to my cognitive abilities right now.
What do you mean?
Just, it gives me things I have to look at. Like, obviously, I think and this is going to sound ridiculous, but when I was engaging with Eastern Orthodox, when I was in the abyss, because I was no longer Protestant, because that's just, I can't fathom how I wasted so many years doing that. One of the major issues I had was the lack of accessibility to Eastern Orthodoxy, which I know is not a reason to deny it. I understand that. And it was that, and the etho of it. Like, it is strictly Greek. It's this, and there is no, like, I would have to drive 2 hours to basically get to divine liturgy.
I mean, I drove 2 hours for the Latin Mass for years, so.
Well, yeah, as I said, it's not an argument to deny it, but there was obviously conflicting issues that I had, so I never engaged. I guess my point is I never engaged fully the things of the Vatican I argument that you're making. One, because I never really come across it. Like, all the arguments I came from were obviously from Protestant views, like Roman Catholicism, like James White, who makes just the most asinine arguments in the world. So that's like my worldview, or coming out of that. So I never got the East's argumentation.
All right, we're going to move on. So I appreciate your comments. You're welcome to call back anytime. But we've been going for a good long chat. Thank you. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it. And I mean that absolutely. I mean that literally. I'm not being fake nice or whatever.